Angel Reese has just landed in Atlanta, and suddenly free agents are making a very different kind of decision. They're heading in the opposite direction of her, not away from Atlanta itself, but away from the situation surrounding her. And the timing? It couldn't look worse, because right after Chicago moved on from her, a wave of players started lining up to join the Sky. Skylar Diggins-Smith, Dejanai Carrington, Azura Stevens, and Ricona Williams all making their way to Chicago like it's the place to be. The same Chicago Sky that people were calling unattractive for free agents just a short time ago. The same franchise that was supposedly being avoided at all costs. So what changed? Maybe the city was never the issue in the first place. Maybe the real story has always been something else entirely, and now the league's recent moves are forcing people to rethink the narrative. And with 2 seasons worth of rumors, reactions, and locker room talk floating around, one question is getting louder by the day. Why is it that some players seem hesitant to align with Angel Reese? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Now that Angel is gone, the players want to go there. Getting ugly. Getting ugly. It's getting late early, as they say. I told you they got rid of the disease. Angel Reese, now Chicago, moving in the right direction.
Let's take a closer look at Angel Reese's numbers, because at first glance, they actually paint a strong picture. 2 All-Star selections, consistent double-doubles across her first 2 seasons, and rebounding totals that had people putting her in conversations with some of the league's elite bigs. But then you look at the Chicago Sky's record, and the story starts to shift. In her first season, Chicago finished 13-27. The very next year, things didn't improve. They actually got worse, dropping to 10-34. That's not the kind of small step back you expect from a rebuilding team. That's a steady slide in the wrong direction with the same central piece leading the way. You're not really getting told no like that. You're gonna hear yes a lot more than no, and just knowing that gives you confidence. I'm excited for what's coming soon. I know it's going to happen. Now, the rebounding numbers deserve a closer look because they don't tell the full story at first glance. A large portion of Reese's rebounds come on the offensive end, and a significant number of those come from her own missed shots. She misses, gets the rebound, and sometimes misses again. Each one of those second chances still shows up in the box score the same way as battling a true center for a contested rebound on the defensive glass. And that's where the debate starts, because there's a difference between stacking rebound stats in traffic and repeatedly cleaning up your own misses. One is control of the paint, the other is something a lot more complicated than the numbers make it seem.
Like, you're gonna get the yeses, you're gonna get more yeses than nos, and just being able to know that. So I'm excited for that. I know that's gonna come.
That kind of high volume activity can look like impact on paper, but it doesn't always translate into wins. And in Chicago's case, it didn't change the direction of the team at all, but the on-court struggles weren't even what ultimately started to fracture things. Courtney Vandersloot had built a long, respected career in Chicago, championship pedigree, leadership, and a reputation as someone teammates trusted completely in big moments. So when she went down with an injury, things reportedly took a sharp turn behind the scenes. According to reports, Angel Reese referred to Vandersloot as old and washed up. And this wasn't something that stayed buried in a private moment. It made its way through the locker room quickly. And that matters because Vandersloot isn't just any veteran. She's the type of player teammates rally around, the kind you don't just disrespect without it echoing through the entire group. So you can imagine how that reportedly landed inside a locker room already under pressure.
We have not been paying attention. The Chicago Sky are on a mission right now. They are on a mission, and frankly, it's hilarious. And what is even more hilarious is the fact that some of these players that Angel Reese drowned, the Chicago Sky are starting to re-sign.
Camila Cardoso reportedly walked out, and it wasn't the kind of minor frustration teams brush off after practice. This wasn't a brief disagreement or a heated moment that cooled down quickly. It was described as her leaving a team setting involving Angel Reese in a way that stood out to everyone present. And that detail matters because Cardoso was viewed as a key part of Chicago's long-term vision. She was one of the players the franchise was genuinely trying to build around, someone seen as part of the future foundation. So when things reached the point where she reportedly felt she couldn't stay in that environment, it raised real questions about what was happening internally. Because Camila Cardoso has never carried herself like someone looking for attention or drama, her reputation has always been simple: show up, play basketball, go home, which is exactly why moments like that don't get ignored.
We can't rely on Courtney to come back at that age that she's at, Reese said. I know she'll be a great asset for us, but we can't rely on that. We need someone probably a little younger with some experience, somebody who's been playing the game and is willing to compete for a championship and has done it before. Courtney Vandersloot, by the way, two-time WNBA champion, 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-WNBA first team, left the New York Liberty, a championship caliber team, to come help out the Chicago. Oh, damn. Oh, damn, oh, dang, oh, dang.
Then came the suspension. Chicago ultimately suspended Angel Reese, and that's not a step franchises take lightly. A move like that usually doesn't happen out of nowhere. It comes after everything else has already been tried behind the scenes. The conversations, the internal warnings, the attempts to correct course, all of it tends to happen first. So when a suspension finally hits, it's often a sign that patience inside the organization has completely worn out. What made this situation even more concerning was that it wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't one rough stretch or a single moment that spiraled out of control and faded away. Instead, the issues reportedly followed a consistent pattern across multiple seasons, and over time, that pattern became harder to ignore, eventually leading to teammates speaking out publicly. At one point, she was described by teammates as a locker room cancer. In professional sports, that kind of label doesn't get thrown around casually. Players usually protect each other, even when things aren't perfect, so when that protection breaks and people start going on record, it signals something deeper. It suggests the problems weren't just on the court. They were affecting chemistry, preparation, and even how people felt showing up to work every day.
First part about this Camila Cardoso last night is you seeing her visibly giving up on her team here. Look at this. Look at this. Camila Cardoso literally walking towards the New York Liberty bench. Walking towards the New York Liberty bench. Like, hey, Brianna, Sabrina, scoot over a little bit. Let me take a seat. Hey, Sandy, is there any room on the bench for me? Can you guys use an extra player? Can I switch jerseys and see how I fit on this?
So on one side, the front office was watching the win total continue to slide. On the other side, the locker room was reportedly becoming more fractured by the day. And the uncomfortable part is that both realities were unfolding at the same time. The box score suggested Angel Reese was producing. The internal feedback from the team told a very different story, that she was becoming part of the problem rather than the solution. At some point, Chicago's leadership seemed to decide those two narratives couldn't exist together anymore. That's when the search for a reset reportedly began. After a second straight season without a playoff appearance, Reese spoke to the Chicago Tribune and made her stance very clear. I'm not settling for the same stuff we did this year. We have to get good players, great players. That's non-negotiable for me. And while that message was public, the response inside the organization was just as real. They looked at 2 straight seasons of losing and, behind the scenes, began forming their own version of what was non-negotiable moving forward.
An Angel Reese hit piece. This Angel Reese article, published by Yahoo Sports, didn't hold back one bit. From the get-go, it was on sight, it seems. Exposing the organization, couldn't stand her. Locker room cancer. The locker room now doing backflips that Angel Reese is gone. The whole double-double debacle.
2 first-round picks and a second-round pick swap in 2028. That was the package Atlanta sent to Chicago for a player who had just come off 2 straight All-Star selections. On paper, that sounds like a solid return, but around the league and online, people weren't exactly impressed. One commentator even dismissed it as a bag of chips, and that reaction wasn't far off from the broader sentiment. In the WNBA, future first-round picks do carry value, but they're not usually the kind of return you expect for a player you believe can shift the direction of a franchise. That type of package often signals something else entirely, not a bidding war for a star, but a situation the original team is ready to move on from, and Chicago's approach backed that up. When organizations are forced to trade a cornerstone due to fit issues, salary concerns, or external pressures, they typically take their time. They explore the market, push for established talent, and try to extract every bit of value possible. That's not what happened here. Atlanta presented draft capital that wouldn't even touch the court for years, and Chicago accepted it without turning it into a drawn-out negotiation. According to one source, the intent was straightforward. The Sky wanted out of the situation so badly, they took the first offer that came through the door. That doesn't read like a franchise carefully maximizing a star asset. It reads like a team choosing closure over leverage.
Reese's contributions are all about making Reese look better on the stat sheet, not making her teammates better. Having 2 first-round draft picks for the next 2 years, however, a franchise can go ahead and create a formidable starting squad if you play your cards right. But even more of a benefit is the fact that, according to some reports, Sky players are thrilled that Reese is gone, making it pretty obvious she was viewed as a locker room cancer.
Players who are considered to be on Angel Reese's level aren't usually moved before their 3rd season unless the organization making the deal believes the return, future draft capital, is more valuable than the player currently on their roster. And that, more than anything, is a tough statement about how a franchise views a 2-time All-Star's present impact. Once Chicago made that decision, they didn't hesitate to shift gears. What came next unfolded so quickly that it almost felt jarring, especially from the outside looking in. If you were an Angel Reese supporter, the pace of it all was hard to ignore. Skylar Diggins-Smith, a 7-time All-Star, signed with the Sky. Dejounte Carrington, the 2024 Most Improved Player and first-team All-Defensive Selection, also joined Chicago. Azura Stevens, a proven veteran with championship-level experience, followed. Then the Sky pulled off a trade to bring in Ryan Howard-Jackson, one of the most dynamic young scorers in the league. And what stood out most wasn't just who they added, it was how it happened. There were no long recruiting battles, no drawn-out negotiations. No public hesitation or concerns about fit or direction. They simply showed up and signed on.
Since they drafted Angel Reese, all of a sudden, the Bravado struggled to win games. And ESPN expects me to believe that the organization is the problem here? Either way, I don't think basketball had anything to do with why Angel Reese was traded. I think Angel Reese was traded because the Bravado thought that she was more trouble than she's worth.
For 2 straight years, the narrative around Chicago was that it wasn't a place players wanted to go. Too unstable, too inconsistent, a franchise that didn't seem to be heading in the right direction. And that storyline held up for as long as Angel Reese was there. Then she left, and that narrative didn't just shift, it collapsed almost immediately. Because suddenly, the idea that stars were avoiding Chicago didn't make much sense anymore. It wasn't about the city itself, it was about whatever was going on internally, inside that locker room and around the team environment. And once that changed, everything else followed. The interest came back, the phone started ringing. At the same time all of that was unfolding, Chicago made another quiet but telling move. They handed Angel Reese's number 5 jersey over to Rokia Jackson. No build-up, no ceremony, just a straightforward transition that caught a lot of fans off guard. Reese's supporters quickly pushed back online, calling for her number to be retired. But that reaction ignores what typically drives those decisions in the first place. Jersey retirements are usually reserved for players who define an era, championships, deep playoff runs, or lasting franchise success. Chicago's record during her time there told a different story. 13-27 in one season, then 10-34 the next. From the organization's perspective, there wasn't a legacy they felt compelled to preserve in that way. So the Sky didn't just move on from Reese. They replaced the jersey, the roster spot, and the storyline around the team itself in one clean reset, and they did it so quickly that it didn't even register as a gradual change. It felt like a full rewrite.
Sky players reportedly sick of Angel Reese as locker room relief hits after the trade. The blockbuster trade ends Reese's 2-season tenure with the Sky, during which she established herself as one of the league's top rebounders and earned All-Star honors in both years. While Reese quickly embraced her new chapter, celebrating on social media and stepping out in public with a new hairstyle, an anonymous source close to the Chicago organization claims the move has brought significant relief inside their locker room.
Atlanta, on the other hand, looked at the entire situation and still described Angel Reese as a perfect fit, a high upside competitive player aligned with their long-term vision. But right around the same window, Brittany Griner, who had been a major part of Atlanta's 2025 roster, departed for the Connecticut Sun just days after the trade was completed. So the question becomes, how exactly did Atlanta frame this move to their fan base? In 2025, the Dream finished 30-4 in the regular season, secured a top seed, and entered the playoffs with real expectations. Then they were knocked out in the first round by the Indiana Fever, and that's where context matters. Indiana was far from full strength, playing through injuries, missing key pieces including Caitlin Clark, and relying heavily on what they had left. Still, Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell competed hard, and somehow that depleted Fever squad still eliminated Atlanta. Now that same Fever team is part of the standard Atlanta is trying to clear with Angel Reese as a centerpiece. So when you break down the roster situation, it becomes hard to ignore the comparison. Heading into 2026, Atlanta looks largely similar to the group that just lost that series, except now Brittany Griner's spot has been filled by Reese. And that's not a minor swap. Griner is a two-time champion, a former MVP, and one of the most decorated interior forces the league has ever seen. Reese, on the other hand, hasn't played a single playoff game yet in her career. So in simple terms, Atlanta moved on from a championship-winning veteran with a proven resume and handed that role to a player whose teams have gone 13-27 and 10-34 in her first two seasons. And internally, that's being framed as an upgrade.
I'm about to win twice as many games as they won last year. Are they sneaky a playoff team right now? With some of these signings that they made? Skylar Diggins, folks. Skylar Diggins. That's a hell of a player.
Alicia Gray finished 4th in MVP voting last season, and Ryan Howard is legitimately one of the stronger perimeter scorers in the league. So this isn't a situation where Atlanta is short on real talent. Both players can space the floor, read the game well without the ball, and create their own offense when possessions break down. The issue has never been about what they bring individually. The real question is how everything fits together once you add Angel Reese into the mix, especially considering the way she operates inside the paint, the emphasis on production, and the tension that reportedly followed her from Chicago. The concern isn't raw ability, it's whether those patterns start to affect the chemistry of a team that was already competitive when games get tight and stakes rise. Then free agency opened up, and Atlanta didn't exactly become the league's most sought-after landing spot. Around the league, conversations started circulating that players had heard stories out of Chicago, and not everyone was eager to jump into a situation built around Reese. That's usually how reputations travel in professional sports. There's no official statement, no headline announcement, just agents talking to other agents, players checking in with each other, and information moving quietly through the league network. By the time teams actually enter recruitment mode, most players already have a sense of what the environment feels like. And in this case, some of them simply chose not to be part of it.
The Atlanta Dream now look like a team on paper with Ryan Howard, with Alicia Gray, with Brittany Griner, and now the league's top rebounder added to their roster. Atlanta should, and I think they went 30-14 last season. Atlanta should be a title contender, although I'm very suspicious because I think Angel Reese is a poison and a toxin that has been added to that locker room.
Angel Reese reportedly became frustrated when she realized free agents weren't exactly rushing to sign up alongside her in Atlanta. She wanted answers. Why weren't players lining up to join? And that question is telling in itself because the explanation was already playing out in real time. Chicago, the same franchise that had spent 2 years being labeled a no-go destination, suddenly started pulling in high-level talent almost immediately after Reese's exit. Within weeks, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Dejanai Carrington, Azura Stevens, and Rokia Jackson either signed or were brought into the Sky's roster with very little hesitation. All of that unfolded right after she left. From the outside, the contrast was hard to miss. Chicago went from being described as undesirable to suddenly becoming a place veterans and impact players were willing to join without much convincing. And the uncomfortable part is whether that shift was ever connected back to her presence in the first place. Reese reportedly watched it all happen, yet still didn't fully recognize reconcile what Chicago's immediate free agency success after her departure might suggest about the struggles the team had recruiting while she was there. At a certain point, that stops looking like coincidence. It starts to look like a pattern, and around the league, people tend to notice patterns even when the players involved don't.
This would be my advice to those young ladies that you mentioned, right, on that new Atlanta team of hers. Get ready to stick your hands out like this and never get the ball. Because she's going to get the rebound, get another rebound, get another rebound, another rebound, and another me-bound. And there's going to be, I'm fascinated by this in this sense. And Scap, I'm going to watch some highlight clips of Atlanta starting this season. I'm going to watch the body language of those teammates when that happens.
Atlanta made a move, they took the gamble. On the surface, the deal itself wasn't outrageous. They didn't sacrifice any current rotation players and only gave up future draft capital. From a pure asset standpoint, the logic can be defended, but what they didn't fully price in was everything that comes with Angel Reese beyond the stat sheet, especially how her reputation would influence the way other players viewed joining that roster. Because building a team doesn't stop at making the trade. It continues in free agency, and that's where perception matters just as much as talent. Now, Atlanta heads into 2026, essentially running it back with a group that already got eliminated in the first round by a depleted Indiana Fever squad. Meanwhile, Chicago looks like a completely different organization, and it changed faster than anyone expected. From the outside looking in, especially if you were following Reese's situation closely, the contrast is striking. 2 straight seasons of the same outcome in Chicago, losing records, missed playoffs, and the constant narrative that free agents didn't want to be there. Then Reese leaves, and almost immediately the entire direction of the franchise shifts. That kind of turnaround doesn't happen by accident. It looks more like a team that identified the source of its problems and moved quickly the moment the situation allowed it.
I think Angel Reese, listen clear. You better take full advantage of this opportunity with the Atlanta Dream. Okay, you are playing with Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray. They are all stars, 20-point per game scores. All you have to do is be the role player that you were born to be.
Camila Cardozo is the player Chicago is truly building around now, and she brings a completely different blueprint for roster construction. Her game is system-based. She doesn't dominate possessions, she doesn't force constant isolation, and she doesn't create that kind of tension where teammates feel like every practice is something they have to mentally brace for. That might sound like the bare minimum in a professional environment, but after 2 seasons of reported friction, it clearly wasn't something the Sky could take for granted. Adding Skylar Diggins-Smith at point guard changes the entire rhythm of the offense. She's a 7-time All-Star who has led winning systems before and understands how to elevate everyone around her, not just herself. DeJohnai Carrington brings immediate defensive impact. On the perimeter, she takes away space and pressure that opposing guards use to operate in freely. Her resume backs it up, too. Most Improved Player honors and a first-team All-Defensive selection in 2024. That's not a depth piece, that's a legitimate two-way presence. Azura Stevens adds veteran stability, the kind of experience that doesn't show up in highlights but matters in close games and late season stretches. And Rokia Jackson provides scoring in a way that naturally opens the floor and creates easier opportunities for everyone else. So this wasn't just Chicago moving on from Angel Reese. It was a full reset in personnel and style, replacing one centerpiece with multiple players whose combined impact reshapes both ends of the floor. And just as important, it happened because those players actually wanted in.
It is pretty clear Chicago Sky as an organization and as management and as a coaching staff said, we are not putting more money into this team. We are not building this team around Angel Reese.
The irony fans keep calling out online is hard to ignore. These are the exact kinds of roster upgrades Angel Reese publicly pushed for during her time in Chicago. She made it clear she wanted elite talent around her, said it was non-negotiable. And in the end, Chicago went out and made those exact types of moves, just not while she was still there. Now shift the focus to Indiana, because this isn't just a side storyline. It directly impacts the landscape of the Eastern Conference heading into 2026. Chicago is reloading quickly. Atlanta is taking its swing. Other teams are reshaping their cores. On paper, that makes Indiana's path through the postseason bracket look a lot tougher, but there's a major difference no roster construction can ignore. Caitlin Clark. Clark entered Indiana when the Fever were sitting at the bottom of the league, and in her first season, she helped push them all the way into the playoffs. Around her were Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and Sophie Cunningham. And that group managed to take down Atlanta in a first-round series while dealing with injuries and limitations. What Clark does goes far beyond scoring. She stretches defenses from well beyond the arc, forcing defenders to pick her up from 30 feet out. That spacing alone changes everything. It frees Boston in the post without constant double teams, opens lanes for Mitchell in transition, and gives Hull and Cunningham cleaner looks on the perimeter instead of having to create everything through traffic. The entire offensive structure operates differently when she's orchestrating it, and that kind of gravitational impact isn't something you just replicate by stacking off-season signings.
They traded away Angel Reese and then said, we're going in. We're going in. Right here, right now. Had to get her off the team to get these players to come. You know, the dynasty starts after you, not with you. Chicago Sky to Angel Reese. Woo-wee. I told you that AR disease ran deep. Nobody wanted to play with that. That is
Chicago's rebuild is starting to look intentional, even smart on paper, but there's still a gap they're trying to close, and Indiana is already living in it. The Fever didn't need a full roster reset or a dramatic offseason overhaul because their foundation was already in place. What they needed was time, another season of reps together, another year of Caitlin Clark adjusting to the pace of the league, and the league itself struggling to fully solve what she brings to the floor. Meanwhile, Angel Reese spent 2 seasons in Chicago where the team remained in constant reshaping mode. That stretch effectively gave Indiana a head start, extra time to build chemistry and structure while other franchises were still trying to stabilize. Individually, Reese led the league in rebounding in back-to-back seasons, earned 2 All-Star selections, and ultimately left Chicago in a situation where her former team moved on quickly enough to reassign her jersey number within weeks. Whatever you call that, it's a very specific type of tenure to leave behind. On the other side, Caitlin Clark entered Indiana when the Fever were at the bottom of the standings and helped turn them into a playoff team in a single season, doing it through ball movement, structure, and elevating everyone around her, not by working against them, and the difference between those two trajectories is hard to ignore. Atlanta is still trying to complete its roster puzzle. Chicago keeps adding talent and reshuffling pieces. And yet, the broader question keeps hanging in the air whenever these storylines overlap. Why does it feel like teams hesitate when it comes to building around Angel Reese? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And click the video on screen. We'll see you in the next breakdown.